समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
आप समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Typically, it is the West that often talks about the dangers of nuclear conflict, especially in South Asia and more specifically between India and Pakistan. We heard some of that chatter during Operation Sindoor. But now eyebrows are being raised across the world after Donald Trump, who is clearly changing the way not just diplomacy is conducted, but also the way the world is organized and assembled. Eyebrows are being raised after Donald Trump has instructed the Pentagon to resume nuclear testing. It is not yet clear whether Trump means nuclear devices or does he mean testing systems. It's not clear at all. But the Trump administration is talking about catching up with Russia and China. This is also a week when Putin made a big show of testing a nuclear-powered missile. Trump's order came moments before his big-ticket meeting with Xi Jinping. Trump and China seem to have reached a truce of some kind, and as America invokes a G2 reference for the world, where does all of this leave India? We'll be talking to Ambassador Rakesh Sood in just a moment from now. I'm Barkha Dutt. You're with the Mojo Story. On the program today, trying to make sense of Trump's world, a world that is changing with every policy decision and pronouncement from the American president. Moments before Donald Trump met with Xi Jinping and America and China reach some sort of truce and at least a rare earths deal for a period of 1 year, Trump also ordered for nuclear tests in America to be resumed. Now, nobody quite knows what this means. If you look at the headlines out of the West, they all talk about how this decision by Trump has only created fear, confusion, and uncertainty. Questions are about whether Trump means nuclear devices or does he mean testing systems. Putin did that earlier this week by testing a nuclear-powered missile. Also, Trump is now talking about a G2 world, America and China, after his meeting with Xi Jinping, a meeting that he gave a scorecard of 12 out of 10 to. Where does all of this leave India and India's security interests? Let me introduce our distinguished guest today. Ambassador Rakesh Sood is with us. He's a veteran diplomat, but he's also India's foremost expert on the area of disarmament and nuclear technology. Welcome, Ambassador. We don't yet know what Trump means. I think the world is waiting to find out what exactly he means. But it's quite clear, listening to officials from the Trump administration, that somewhere they believe that America was left behind, Russia and China. Maybe Putin's testing of this nuclear-powered missile triggered him. How do you read this decision from Trump, this pronouncement from Trump? What does it mean?
Well, during his first term, President Trump had actually said he'd given the orders that the Nevada test site should be kept ready to resume testing as and when required. And some funds had been allocated, so it was as if there was some expectation perhaps at that time, because if you remember during his first term, there was a lot of rhetoric being exchanged between President Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un of North Korea. They were threatening they were showing whose mine is bigger than yours kind of thing, and so on. But then then he had 2 summits with him, and that kind of went under the carpet. This time, I think he has been encouraged also by the Russian test of the Buravestnik, which is a very unusual missile because it is the first. It's actually a cruise missile which flies at a very low altitude. Therefore, it cannot be detected by radars or early warning satellites. And secondly, it has almost an indefinite kind of a range because it is nuclear powered. And so it can remain aloft for 10 hours, 12 hours, 15 hours, even more, 24 hours if need be, uh, and then be used to strike. And nuclear propulsion in space is something which has been talked about but was never tried before. And this is the first time. This puts a whole different complexion on nuclear deterrence, especially among the major powers, which so far have made extensive use of early warning satellites and radar systems to be able to track incoming missiles and have, use that to adopt policies like launch on warning or even preemption if they so desire. But then that is perhaps what has led to President Trump's announcement on social media saying that he has given orders for resumption of testing. But as you pointed out, there are some experts who have said, well, it's not very clear whether he is going to resume testing, explosive testing. Because mind you, the US, like Russia and like China, have been undertaking what is called non-explosive testing or zero yield testing. What they have refrained from is explosive testing. So people are speculating whether does he mean explosive testing or does he mean testing of existing systems, in which case they could test other aspects of systems, but not necessarily an explosive test of the nuclear warhead.
And we don't know the answer to that, right? We actually don't know, does he mean nuclear devices or does he mean systems? Putin tested a system. We don't know what Trump means.
Well, Putin tested a system, but as I said, these are countries, I mean, like the United States has undertaken, till it declared a moratorium in 1993 or 94, if I remember right.
Yeah, Bush years, by George Bush. I think Bush was president then, if I'm not wrong.
Yes, so probably 1992. So it has carried out more than 1,000 tests. By 1992, it had carried out more than 1,000 tests, which means that it has a wealth of data. And obviously, it had tested all its designs. And by this time, there was a lot of development in computer science and data processing and things like that, so that the data that was accumulated could help design a new warhead without actually undertaking an explosive test. And that is how the term zero yield test was brought about in a definition. It was something that India had objected to very strongly when this was brought in. But then similarly, at that time, Russia and former Soviet Union, if you take both together, they had carried out more than 700 tests. China had carried out 47 tests by that time. And so, but if you remember last year, Russia had actually ratified the CTBT, the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. But last year, in an interesting move, President Putin announced that Russia was withdrawing its ratification, thereby putting it at par in terms of the CTBT status and its applicability to Russia, at par with the US, because the US signed the CTBT during the Clinton years, but has never been able to ratify it. There's too much domestic opposition to it from the hardliners. And that goes back to the Clinton years. So as a result now, the CTBT is one of those funny treaties that was concluded and opened for signature in 1996. It was supposed to ban explosive testing.
Yeah.
It actually permitted zero yield testing and has never yet entered into force.
Yeah.
So it's an ironically poorly negotiated treaty. That's all I can say.
But there are many things ironic about this moment. I don't know if you've seen there's a new movie out on Netflix called A House of Dynamite. And it is actually about this. It's actually about what happens when America is attacked by an unattributed nuclear missile, which the Americans think has come from North Korea. But, I won't give away the rest of the movie. It's just odd that this movie has released this week as Trump has announced this. Maybe it's just coincidence. My question to you is this. What does this mean for us? Does it mean anything for us? Or these are the sort of the big three having their own contestation? We don't have any role in it. There have been a lot of people who've called for India to review its no first use doctrine, given the security situation in the neighborhood. There are others, of course, who argue that it has given us a kind of moral advantage as a responsible nuclear power, and we should hold on to that. What do you think of that, this voluntary no first use doctrine that we have always embraced? How do you see that?
Well, it depends on how India perceives its threats. And let me say, we don't perceive an existential threat from China, in the sense that whatever dispute we may have with China, we don't think that the Chinese are going to attack us, and if it escalates, with nuclear weapons and then come and occupy New Delhi. So in that sense, it does not threaten the existence of India. I think it is fair enough to say that we don't see Pakistan also as an existential threat. So therefore, based on our threat perception, and these are the two adversaries, we are not looking at any other country as even a potential adversary. And so therefore, from that point of view, if we don't see either as an existential threat, then do we need to deploy nuclear weapons as weapons of war fighting or as weapons of deterrence? That is the question. And so far, the governments have chosen to answer it as in favor of the fact that nuclear weapons for India are weapons of deterrence. Now, you go back to the US and Soviet period, the Cold War, or where US is today. US sees nuclear weapons as weapons of war fighting. They also provide nuclear guarantees or a nuclear umbrella to their allies. In Asia, for example, Japan or South Korea are protected by the US nuclear umbrella because that keeps them from developing nuclear weapons, or countries in Europe, say Germany and so on. So now, from that point of view, if US has to be ready to defend Germany or Japan or South Korea by even using nuclear weapons, if they are attacked, if these countries are attacked, then it means a first use policy, a war fighting policy. Whereas we don't provide any nuclear umbrellas to any other country. It's just meant for us. And so we have to look at it in terms of what our threat environment is, what our threat perceptions are, what is our assessment of our threat perceptions. So therefore, while I fully understand that we must keep no policy is written and carved in stone, and therefore we must keep updating it from time to time, say every 5 years, taking into account the changing security environment and taking into account changing scientific and technological developments. So far, I think that we have done well to retain the no first use policy. Because let me also point out, to move from no first use to first use is not merely deleting one word in your policy document. It's not just that you make it from no first use, you delete no, and it becomes first use.
Yes.
It means that you have to develop a new system. Of first use means that you have to have early warning systems. It also means that you must have a range of nuclear weapons, because right now we talk of inflicting unacceptable damage with a no first use policy. But if we have to have a first use policy, then you can't employ your entire arsenal at first use. You will use it, there will be certain red lines and certain signaling which will have to be undertaken. So your arsenal composition will need to change. Command and control levels will perhaps need to be delegated and will need to then be made more hierarchical, in the sense that a low yield weapon could perhaps be delegated for battlefield use or something like that, and up the chain, as it were. Now, so it would require a fair bit of revision, and that's why. But if need be, we could certainly discard the no first use policy. But then we need to be careful as to what is driving that, because we've also maintained that we don't wish to get into an arms race,
Yeah.
because we look upon nuclear weapons as purely as a deterrent against nuclear weapon use, because we don't perceive an existential threat to the very existence of India from any of our adversaries.
Point taken. But talking a little bit about the changed security environment for India, given the fact that a lot of security assumptions have played on the narrative that America sees India as a countervailing force to the rise of China. That may not be the case anymore in the Trump years. We have seen Trump strike some sort of deal, still untested, with Xi Jinping. We have seen a kind of temporary truce between the two parties. He slashed China's tariffs to 47%. He didn't even talk about the China purchase of Russian oil. There's a rare earths deal for a year. Do you believe that this development actually leaves India vulnerable, that what used to be called the India-Pacific or the Indo-Pacific will now once again become the Indian Ocean, that an Indo-Pacific strategy may simply not exist for Trump, especially if he's able to sustain somewhat of a pact with China?
Well, you're right, but then it is difficult to predict what Trump is going to do. In his statements, he has announced that he looks forward to receiving Xi Jinping in the US, and he looks forward also to visiting him next year. So at least 2 bilateral summits can be foreseen for 2026, in addition to perhaps other meetings on the margins of other multilateral events. But at the same time, we continue to get ambivalent voices about the dates for fixing of the Quad Summit, which is supposed to be held in India, for which we are a bit hesitant, and President Trump doesn't want to seem to commit to a date. So clearly, in his scheme of things, or in his worldview, the Quad Summit assumes lesser salience, and therefore, by definition, it is reasonable to conclude that even the Indo-Pacific salience sort of comes down compared to what it was, as compared to his desire to maintain a good relationship, a positive relationship. In fact, some of the Americans have also called it a potential G2.
That's what I was saying, that in a G2 world, where is India?
Well, obviously in a G2, since we are not part of the 2, so we are outside it.
Yeah.
But since he is looking at that and he attributes importance to that, that obviously takes greater priority in his White House.
I understand that. And I think my question, therefore, is in the middle, it seemed like there was some progress that had been made between India and the US because Trump's tonality changed. He called the prime minister a couple of times. He had sort of an odd way of expressing his praise for Prime Minister Modi, but he went ahead and did that. He made a Diwali call, he made a birthday call. But the deal is still stuck. And in the meantime, he signed something with China, right? And how much should that concerns?
Our leverage with President Trump is obviously different compared to the leverage that China has vis-a-vis the United States. China imposed countervailing duties. China stopped buying soybeans from United States, thereby hurting a key chunk of President Trump's voter base, the MAGA base, so to say. China also, because of the fact that it controls, depending on how you slice it, if you look at certain rare earths, it controls anywhere from 70 to 90% or 60 to 90%. If you look at its processing capabilities, then if you take the whole rare earth sector as a whole, then the Chinese control on that market is more than 70%. And that has led to certain difficulties in industries across the board, particularly the high-tech industries involving rechargeable batteries in terms of for chips, high-value chips and things like that. Also for defense industry, because a lot of these very modern, sophisticated fighter aircraft require certain small quantities of rare earths, and so the supply chains get upset. And so therefore the Chinese leverage, and China has said that for 1 year they will lift these restrictions. So once again, both sides are kind of testing the waters to see whether this page that they have turned after 6 months of rhetoric about tariffs and so on, this they've turned a new page. Is this going to be possible to build upon, or will it somewhere will they find it difficult and things will go back, or they will go into the reverse gear? It's tough to say, but we don't have that kind of leverage. So we have to work. We are trying. As we've said, we've had many rounds of talks. Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal has been making encouraging sounds recently. We'll have to wait and see. I mean, nothing is concluded till everything is concluded. You can't till it is ready for signature, as it were, until Trump has said, "All right, this is a good deal." But at the same time, one thing is there. He continues to maintain that his threats of trade were the ones that enabled peace between India and Pakistan. So in that sense, he, I'm sure, does resent the fact that India has not wholeheartedly gone out and supported him. In fact, India has said that this was a totally bilateral telephone call that brought about the end of hostilities. So that, plus the fact that we have less leverage, but I think we're still trying to negotiate what is perhaps a deal which is saleable at home, because there are certain sectors like the agricultural sector, like the dairy sector, and so on, which are very critical in terms of as domestic, as they involve large domestic sections of society.
And that is the only public statement Prime Minister Modi actually made, that he said that these sectors would remain safe. If you remember, he said, even if I have to pay a personal price, I can't open up these sectors. I have a last question for you, and that question is this. Trump has sanctioned 2 Russian oil firms, which means that technically India can't purchase oil from those 2 firms. With China, the issue of China buying Russian oil has not even been brought up. And the question is this: there are those who believe that it's time to let go of this position that we won't, we'll on Russian oil, because in any case it was statedly a commercial position and not an ideological one. In other words, we've said we'll buy oil where it's cheapest, right? So with the sanctions, is that an exit route to India to get out of this rigmarole on the issue of Russian oil? Question 1. And question 2, there have been suggestions that if you can't open up your agriculture and dairy, start buying other things from America. Maybe that'll make Trump happy. Maybe that's something he'll take back to his voter base. How do you see both of these questions?
Well, on the first one, I think with the ban on selling of oil by 2 Russian companies, Rosneft and Lukoil, it's a difference. It is a qualitative shift in terms of the US policy, because before this happened, what US had was not a ban on exports of Russian oil, but a price cap, in the sense that Russia could sell as much oil as it wanted. There were certain restrictions on the kind of ships, tankers that could carry Russian oil. But as long as that oil was below $60, that was the cap. Now what has happened is, now there are a number of Russian companies that export Russian oil. About 60-65% of Russian oil exports are by these 2 companies. Those are banned. So that means that the other companies, smaller companies that continue to export Russian oil, can still continue to export Russian oil provided it is in conformity with the price cap.
Yeah.
Now, as I mentioned, these two companies are the largest. They account for 65% of the export. So obviously, we were buying a lot of oil. Our companies were buying a lot of oil from these companies. So there are two options. You may continue to buy Russian oil, but you may choose to shift to smaller companies. That's
Yeah,
one option.
but you do that if you're holding on to your position. But if you're trying to make Trump, if you try to soften up Trump, then you don't do that.
Well, yes. So therefore, if we want to say that, look, we are conforming, because obviously our companies don't want to get on the wrong side. After all, this is a very similar kind of a situation in the sense that was done in 2019 when we stopped buying Iranian oil, because it would have brought Indian companies under US sanctions. And they didn't want to come under US sanctions because it would have deprived them of dollar dealings. They would have been kind of cut out of the SWIFT system of banking and so on. So let's say if we want to prevent a similar outcome here, but we continue to find that, say, buying Russian oil is, as you said, it is financially beneficial for India. You can continue to buy it, if you can, from smaller Russian companies that have not been sanctioned, because only two of them have been sanctioned. So that's not by shifting to smaller countries. Sorry, maybe I misspoke. Smaller companies, smaller Russian companies, because 35 to 40% of oil exports from Russia are by smaller companies, not by Rosneft and Lukoil.
Yeah.
That's one possibility. On the other hand, if you want to show Trump that, look, maybe we can't compromise as much on agriculture, but look, because of this, we can do a deal because we will accept your argument on Russian oil. Maybe we can stop buying Russian oil and buy more of American oil. Or
Yeah, but
wherever.
which way do you think we should go? I mean, I guess I'm asking you in the end, do you see any signs of improvement? The language seems politer, but has anything
Yeah.
else changed?
Well, we have also reduced our, if you look at the imports
By about 10%, by about 10%, by about
by about
10%.
10%, because the
Yeah,
price differential has come down.
yeah,
And if
yes,
that happens, then perhaps we can see where the prices are going, and to that extent get a time frame within which we will reduce it from whatever the current levels are to, say, I don't know what the current levels are, whether it's about 500,000 barrels a day or whatever. But whatever, let's say if it is X number of barrels a day, we could say that it will become 0.5x after 6 months or
Well,
something like that.
that's what Trump has claimed. Trump has claimed that India, or Modi has assured him that
That
there
we
will be
will do that.
that we will do that. I mean,
See,
not the specific figures, but the tapering
yeah,
out.
yeah. But the thing is that Prime Minister Modi cannot be seen in a domestic environment as
Yeah,
succumbing to pressure from Trump, especially when Trump continues to say, my good friend Modi, and he
yeah,
keeps saying, oh, he's a very tough man and all the rest of it, but he continues to
yeah,
say nice things about him.
yeah,
And but then at the same time, he kind of squeezes wherever he can in order to get the best possible bargain for the US. Now, that puts Prime Minister Modi obviously in a difficult position, because he doesn't like to be seen as having been squeezed, and least of all by somebody who's calling him a good friend.
that's right. So, in conclusion, how would you describe the state of play between India and the US, given all of these developments that have taken place in the last week?
We will just have to sense how far we can go. If you notice, Prime Minister Modi did not go to Kuala Lumpur, where
The
there
ASEAN,
was
ASEAN, yeah,
yes, for the East Asia Summit, and because there was a possibility that
I mean,
maybe.
Modi seems to be avoiding Trump till there's something to say that both sides agree on, basically.
Well, exactly. I mean, he kind of chose to not get into that, because then it also becomes difficult to control how it
Plays out.
plays out in media. I
Yeah.
mean, there could be a
Interesting
certain
times.
Yes, that of course, needless to say.
Thank you, Ambassador Rakesh Sood. Always a pleasure. Learn a lot from you. Thank you so much for your time. Take care.
Thank you. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.